Third listening. Part 1. Listen to the first part of the lecture again. As you listen, complete the notes in your books.
Today, I want to talk about levels of language usage. You probably have noticed that people express similar ideas in different ways, depending on the situation they are in. This is very natural. All languages have two general broad categories or levels of usage: a formal level and an informal level. And this is true for English too. I'm not talking about correct and incorrect English. What I'm talking about are two levels of correct English. Each level is correct when used in a particular situation. Formal language is the kind of language you find in textbooks, reference books such as encyclopedias, and in business letters. For example, a letter to a university would be in a formal style. You would also use formal English in essays and papers that you write in school. People usually use formal English when they give classroom lectures or speeches at ceremonies, such as graduations. We also tend to use formal language in conversations with people we don't know well, or with people we have a formal relationship, or speeches at ceremonies, such as graduations. We also tend to use formal language in conversations with people we don't know well, or with people we have a formal relationship with, such as professors, bosses, doctors, friends of our parents, strangers, etc. Informal language is used in conversation with colleagues, family, and friends. Formal relationship with, such as professors, bosses, doctors, friends of our parents, strangers, etc. Informal language is used in conversation with colleagues, family, and friends, and when we write personal notes, emails, or text messages to friends.
Part 2. Now listen to the second part of the lecture and take your own notes.
Formal language is different from informal language in several ways. However, today I'm just going to talk about a couple of ways. First of all, formal language tends to be more polite. Interestingly, formal language usually takes more words to be polite. For example, I might say to a friend or family member, "Close the door, please." But to a stranger or someone in authority, I probably would say something like, "Would you mind closing the door?" Or, "Excuse me, could you please close the door?" Using words like could and would makes my request sound more polite, as well as more formal. With friends and family, I want to be polite, so I use the word please. But I don't want to sound too formal, so I don't use phrases like would you or excuse me. Another difference between formal and informal language is some of the vocabulary. There are some words and phrases that belong in formal language and others that are informal. Let me give you a couple of examples of what I mean. Let's say that I really like soccer. If I'm talking to my friend or colleague, I might say, "I'm just crazy about soccer." But if I were talking to my boss or a friend of my parents, I would probably say, "I really enjoy soccer," or "I like soccer very much." Or let's say I'm telling someone some news I heard about the police. To my friend, I might call the police the cops, but to my teacher, I would say the police. The line between formal and informal language is not always clear, and people are probably less formal today than in the past. But it is useful to be aware that these two levels or categories do exist. The best way for a non native speaker of English to learn the difference is to observe the different ways English speakers speak or write in different situations. The speech of television news reporters, your college professors in class, your doctors in their offices, etc., will usually be more formal. However, the speech of your classmates, teammates, family members, and friends will generally be more informal. The difference can be learned over time by observing and interacting with native or near native speakers of English.
The topic of a lecture is level of language usage. You have noticed that people express similar ideas in different ways depending on the situation they are in. All language have two levels, and it is true for English. I'm not talking about correct and incorrect English. Both are correct. Each level is correct when used in a particular situation. Formal language is used in textbook reference books such as encyclopedias and in business letter. For example, a letter to a university. Formal language also used in essays and papers. People use formal language when they give classroom lectures or speeches at ceremonies such as graduation. We use formal language with people we don't know well or with people we have a formal relationship with, such as professors, bosses, doctors, friends of our parents, or strangers. Formal informal language is used in conversation with colleagues, families, members, and friends. We use informal language in personal notes, emails, or text messages to friends. The first difference of a formal language and informal language is formal language tend to be more polite than informal language. Formal language you usually text more words to be more polite. For example, I might say to a friend or a family member, close the door please. But to a stranger, I I would say, would you mind closing the door? Or excuse me, could you please close the door? Uh, the words like could or would makes my request more polite. And with friends and families, I don't want to be too formal, so I use the words please. Another difference between formal and informal language is vocabulary. For example, when I mean I really like soccer, I would say team just crazy about soccer when I talk to my friend and colleagues. But when I'm talking to my boss, I might say I really like soccer or I like soccer very much. Another example, I would say the Cubs with my friend, but with my teacher, I would say the police. The line between formal and informal language is not always clear, and now people are less formal than in the past. Mm, we can learn the differences between formal and informal language by observing how native speakers talk or write in different situations. For example, uh, you can For example, news reporter or colleague professors in class and doctor may use formal language. In the other hand, um, the speech of classmates, teammates, family members, and friends will be more informal.